one of my great joys as being bishop, which surprised me, is confirming. It's such a privilege because it's one of the real opportunities to encounter some of the young people. You know, it's kind of laid on. And last summer, one of the young people who was in one of our confirmation groups wrote to me, and she said she wanted to kind of acknowledge the great good that she was experiencing in the sacrament of confirmation and the classes she was attending. And she went on to say how much she was learning from the kind of real set of values and coming to know something of the life of Jesus Christ and the church and how you might live well. However, she went on to say that she didn't feel she could go forward with confirmation at this point because what she was learning in school and in her kind of professional learning experience, if you like, in education, and particularly in science, she was clearly quite a profound, very high on that level of the kind of scientific mind. I felt for her because when I was at school I had a bit of a geek like that. I kind of had this science bent, a bit of a science bent. But she said what she was learning in science went completely against any sense of belief in God. And therefore she wanted to postpone receiving the sacrament of confirmation. And it's one of the huge challenges, I think, isn't it? How do we present something of the truth of what we've experienced and what we know and what's been revealed and shown to us? How do we communicate that in a way which becomes an extraordinary motivator for others, and particularly for the young? That the beauty and the richness that we've encountered, how can we try and help others come into the beauty of that encounter? Such that, for example, things like science and faith are not left as opposing elements. One of the things that helped me, I must say, when I was a teenager was discovering people of faith who were great scientists. Yeah, so I kind of pointed her when I wrote back in the direction of one or two of those, in the hope that that might help her on the journey a bit. And also I think another thing that comes into play here is people have all sorts of wayward understandings of God. And I probably do myself. He's basically a bigger version of me, isn't he? Or, you know, I once went on holiday. I was supplying. It's one of the nice perks of when you teach in a seminary, you get long holidays. And I used to do quite nice supplies in parishes in the United States. And I was doing one in California. And I went to Yosemite National Park. And the Yetis, you know, the kind of mythical figure of Yellowstone National Park. God's a bit like that wayward understanding of a kind of bigger version of a hidden being who's going to basically rain on my parade. Yeah? That's kind of wayward view that we can have of God. In the opening chapter of Charles Dickens's classic novel Hard Times, we hear the following words from Mr. Gradgrind. What I want is facts. Teach these boys and girls nothing but facts. Facts alone are wanted in life. Plant nothing else and root out everything else. You can only form the minds of reasoning animals upon facts. Nothing else will ever be of any service to them. It's the principle on which I teach my own children, and it's the principle on which we must teach these children. Stick to the facts, sir. What Dickens does in that kind of classic novel is he contrasts this dull and dreary philosophy of Gradgrind's school in Coketown with the magic, the vitality, and the exuberance of Mr. Sleary's circus. And the saddest sentence, in many ways, in the whole novel is when Mr. Gradgrind says to his young daughter Louisa, "Never wonder." And it's very poignant in the novel because Louisa goes in search beyond the limitations of her father's philosophy and his way of passing on truth. And she discovers the circus tent, and she discovers that it has a loophole round the back, and she sneaks in, and she discovers there that rather than her father's philosophy, everything is wonderful and beautiful, and her imagination is on fire. And it seems to me that what we have to try and recapture in this call of go make disciples is that being a member of the church, following Jesus Christ as a disciple, is much more like being in Mr. Sleary's circus than it is in being in Mr. Gradgrind's Coketown school. But how often, I think, people experience us as being more like Gradgrind than Sleary. You know, my grandmother was west of Ireland, and we used to go on holidays, and she had I love sultanas and raisins and things like that. And I've always loved them ever since I was a little boy. And my grandmother used to make cakes and particularly do this beautiful homemade soda bread, which you would put sultanas in. But whenever we went on holiday, she knew she had to put the raisins and the sultanas up on a very high shelf. Because otherwise, I would always, when they weren't looking, raid her bread cupboard and fill my mouth with sultanas. I don't want lots of packs of sultanas. I just say that. On occasion, she would reach up to this. It was rather, you know, it was in some ways rather cruel punishment, really, because they were on display. You know, among all these beautiful dishes and statuettes that she'd got sent from relatives in America, there was this pack of sultanas. And I was always much more interested in looking at the pack of sultanas than the statues and stuff. But on occasion, not just when I was good, but actually, usually the moments when my mother had had a go at me, or even gone a bit further than that, my grandmother would reach up and take the sultanas down, and she would get right down on her knees, and she would, without my mother seeing, give me a handful of sultanas. But the God of Jesus Christ is like my grandmother, like that. You know, but we can't. I couldn't jump up to it. You can't reach God. You know, if you can reach Him of your own efforts, then it's not God. It's something you've created. But the God we believe in Jesus Christ, has come right down on the stone concrete floor, and He's not only come down, He's not only given us a handful of sultanas, He's given His very self.